He threw the pen at her across the mahogany table. He called her a burden. He called her a thrift store anchor, dragging down his rising empire. Declan Mercer thought he was shedding dead weight when he forced his quiet, plain-dressing wife, Isolde, to sign the divorce papers. He was laughing as the ink dried, already texting his mistress about the victory. What Declan didn't know was that the cheap dress Isolde was wearing was vintage Chanel. The clunker she drove was a sentimental keepsake, and the woman he just mocked was the sole heiress to the Sterling Vanguard Trust, a shadow banking empire worth $3 trillion. He didn't just sign a divorce, he signed his own death warrant, and the ink, it was barely dry before the nightmare began. The air in the conference room of Hastings, O'Malley, and Vance on the 42nd floor of the Rockefeller Center was cold enough to preserve meat. It smelled of lemon polish and aggressive billable hours. Declan Mercer sat with his legs sprawled wide, the picture of arrogant relaxation. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus that he had bought to celebrate his company's first public valuation. It was a beautiful watch, flashy and precise, much like how Declan viewed himself. Across from him sat Isolde. She was small, seemingly shrinking into the oversized leather chair. She wore a simple charcoal gray cardigan that had seen better days, or so Declan thought, and her hair was pulled back in a severe, unglamorous bun. She looked tired. She looked ordinary. In Declan's world of high-stakes tech startups and Hamptons galas, ordinary was the ultimate sin. "Come on, Izzy," Declan sighed, tapping his fingers on the glass table. "Let's get this over with. I have a dinner reservation at Le Bernardin at 8. You know how hard it is to get a table there." He didn't mention who the dinner was with, but they both knew. It was with Victoria Ashcroft. Victoria was everything Isolde wasn't. Loud, blonde, undeniably glamorous, and the daughter of a mid-tier real estate mogul. In Declan's eyes, Victoria was the perfect accessory for a man about to break into the Fortune 500. Isolde was just the college sweetheart who hadn't kept up. Isolde looked up, her eyes dark and unreadable. She didn't look sad. If Declan had been paying attention, really paying attention, he might have noticed she looked bored. "Are you sure about this, Declan?" Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. "Once I sign this, there is no going back. I am waiving spousal support. I am waiving claim to Mercer Dynamics. I am walking away with nothing but what I came in with." Declan let out a short, cruel laugh. He leaned forward, his face twisting into a sneer. "Izzy, look at you. You think I'm worried about you taking half? My lawyers have drafted this so tight you couldn't pry a penny out with a crowbar. But it's cute that you're waiving it. Lets me save on legal fees fighting you. You're doing me a favor." He picked up the heavy fountain pen and tossed it across the table. It clattered loudly, spinning until it hit Isolde's hand. "Sign it," he commanded. "Stop pretending you have leverage. You're a librarian, Izzy. You live in a world of dusty books. I live in the real world. I need a partner who understands equity, optics, and power. Victoria understands that. You understand coupons." Isolde stared at the pen. She picked it up. It was a Mont Blanc he had bought for himself last Christmas. "I supported you for 5 years, Declan," she said, her voice steadying. "I paid the rent when you were coding in the garage. I paid for the servers when you couldn't afford electricity. And I paid you back," Declan snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "I bought you that apartment in Queens. I paid off your student loans. We're square. Stop acting like a martyr. You were an investment that capped out. I've outgrown you." The lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, no relation, simply a coincidence of the trade, cleared his throat awkwardly. Even he, paid $400 an hour to be heartless, found Declan's display distasteful. "Mr. Mercer, perhaps we can just execute the documents," the lawyer suggested. "Right?" Declan adjusted his silk tie. "Sign it, Izzy. Go find a nice accountant or a school teacher, someone on your level." Isolde looked at him for one long second. A strange glint appeared in her eye. It wasn't tears. It was the look of a demolition expert pressing the button. "Okay, Declan," she said. I'll go find someone on my level. She uncapped the pen. The scratching sound of the nib against the crisp paper seemed deafening in the silent room. She signed her name with a flourish. Isolde Blackwood. She dropped the pen. Done, she said, standing up. She didn't take the copy of the papers. She didn't ask for a ride. She simply picked up her worn, leather tote bag. Good, Declan smirked, snatching the papers to ensure the signature was valid. Don't expect a ride down. My driver is waiting for me, and I don't want the upholstery smelling like whatever mothballs you use. Isolde paused at the heavy oak door. She turned back, a small, chilling smile playing on her lips. Goodbye, Declan. Enjoy the dinner. I hear the sea bass is excellent at Le Bernardin, although the owner, Eric, he usually reserves the best table for his actual VIPs. I am a VIP, Declan shouted at her back as the door clicked shut. I'm the CEO of Mercer Dynamics. He looked at his lawyer, shaking his head. Can you believe her? Delusional to the end. Finally, I'm free. Declan Mercer believed he had just cut an anchor loose. He had no idea he had just cut the parachute cord while in freefall. Isolde walked out of the skyscraper and onto Fifth Avenue. It had started to rain a cold, biting New York drizzle. Declan came out of the building 5 minutes later, adjusting his cufflinks. He saw Isolde standing near the curb, seemingly waiting for a taxi. He laughed to himself. It was rush hour in Midtown. She'd be standing there for 40 minutes. He pulled out his phone and dialed Victoria. It's done, babe. The ink is dry. I'm a free man. Yeah. She took it like a kicked puppy. Sad, really. His black Escalade pulled up. His driver, a burly man named Tony, hopped out with an umbrella. Tony, get me to the restaurant. And step on it, Declan ordered. As he was about to step into the SUV, he paused to gloat one last time. He looked over at Isolde, standing 10 feet away without an umbrella, the rain dampening her gray cardigan. Hey, Declan shouted over the traffic noise. If you hurry, you might catch the subway before the rats come out. Save yourself the cab fare. Isolde didn't turn around. She was looking at her phone. Suddenly, the traffic on Fifth Avenue seemed to part. A low, guttural hum vibrated through the pavement, distinct from the honking yellow cabs. Around the corner glided a car that made Declan's Escalade look like a child's toy. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, but not a standard model. It was the extended wheelbase, Serenity Edition, painted a deep, custom midnight blue that looked almost black. The chrome grille gleamed even in the gray rain. Declan froze. He knew cars. He knew that car cost more than his apartment. He wondered which diplomat or billionaire was passing through. The Rolls-Royce slowed down. It didn't pass. It pulled up directly in front of Isolde. Declan's mouth fell open. No way, he muttered. It's probably just asking for directions. The rear door of the Rolls-Royce didn't just open. It was opened by a man who stepped out from the front passenger seat. The man was dressed in a suit that cost more than Declan's entire wardrobe. He held a massive black umbrella, shielding Isolde instantly from the rain. My apologies for the delay, madame, the man said, his voice carrying clearly through the damp air. The board meeting in Zurich went long, but the jet landed at Teterboro 20 minutes ago. We have the secure line ready for you. Isolde nodded, her demeanor instantly shifting. The slump in her shoulders vanished, her chin raised. She looked like a queen, accepting tribute. Thank you, Arthur, she said, her voice crisp and commanding a tone Declan had never heard in 5 years of marriage. Did the acquisition of the lithium mines in Chile go through? Signed an hour ago, madame. The competition didn't stand a chance. Good. Let's go home. The estate in the Hamptons. I need a hot bath and a bottle of the 59 Dom Perignon. Of course, madame. Isolde slid into the back seat, the creamy leather interior glowing softly in the gloom. Declan stood paralyzed, the rain soaking his expensive Armani suit because Tony had forgotten to cover him in the confusion. He watched as his librarian ex-wife, the woman he had mocked for clipping coupons, vanished into a rolling fortress of wealth. He ran forward, splashing through a puddle. Izzy! Hey, Izzy! The window of the Rolls-Royce glided down an inch. Isolde's eyes appeared, cold as ice. Whose car is that? Declan stammered, breathless. Are you dating someone? Is it the boss of the library? Isolde laughed. It was a dark, rich sound. The library? Oh, Declan, you really never did ask about my family, did you? You were always too busy talking about yourself. What are you talking about? Your dad was a watch repairman in Ohio? My father, Isolde said, her voice lowering, collected watches. He didn't repair them, and he didn't live in Ohio. He lived in Zurich. The Blackwood name, on the divorce papers? It's not just a maiden name, Declan. It's the holding company that owns the bank your startup just borrowed $20 million from. Declan felt the blood drain from his face. What? I signed the papers, Declan. I'm not your wife anymore, which means I'm no longer conflicted out of calling in your debts. The window rolled up. The Rolls-Royce purred and accelerated, disappearing into the sea of red taillights. Declan stood alone on the corner. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from his company's finance app. Alert. Credit line, frozen. Lender, Blackwood Vanguard Trust. Reason, breach of covenant. Tony, Declan whispered, dropping his phone into a puddle. Get me to the office. Forget dinner. But Mr. Mercer, Miss Ashcroft is waiting, the driver said. Shut up, Declan screamed, his voice cracking. Just drive. By the time Declan burst into the headquarters of Mercer Dynamics, his suit was ruined, and his hair was plastered to his forehead. The open-plan office, usually buzzing with the energy of 20-something coders drinking cold brew, was dead silent. His CFO, a nervous man named Gary, was standing by Declan's glass-walled office, pacing. Declan, thank God. Gary rushed over, sweating profusely. We have a situation. A massive situation. I know the credit line is frozen, Gary. Fix it. Call the bank representatives. Tell them it's a glitch, Declan barked, storming into his office and slamming the door. Gary followed him in. It's not just the credit line, Declan. It's the servers. Our cloud provider is Nebula Systems, right? Yes, obviously. We have a 5-year contract. We had a 5-year contract, Gary corrected, his voice trembling. Nebula Systems just sent a termination notice. Effective immediately. Breach of morality clause. Morality clause? What the hell did I do? Declan screamed, throwing his briefcase onto the sofa. Apparently, Gary looked down at his tablet. The majority shareholder of Nebula Systems takes the treatment of spouses very seriously. They cited public disparagement of a partner as a violation of their ethical standards. They attached a video. A video? Gary turned the tablet around. It was a grainy security camera clip from inside the law firm conference room. It showed Declan throwing the pen. It showed him sneering. The audio was crystal clear. You're a thrift store anchor. If you not en perficis. How did they get this? Declan gasped. That was a private meeting. The firm, Hastings, O'Malley, and Vance. Gary swallowed hard. Declan, I looked them up. They are a subsidiary of the Sterling Group. So? Izzy's maiden name, on the marriage certificate, wasn't it Sterling? Declan froze. He thought back to 5 years ago. Isolde Sterling. He had thought it sounded quaint, like sterling silver. He never connected it to the Sterling Group, the conglomerate that owned half the real estate in Manhattan and major stakes in tech infrastructure. She set me up, Declan whispered, sinking into his chair. She owned the law firm? She owns the building, Declan. She owns the firm. She owns the cloud provider. And as of 10 minutes ago, I got a call from our landlord. They're tripling our rent next month. Declan put his head in his hands. He thought about Victoria. Victoria, with her rich father, who owned a few strip malls in Jersey. He had left a titan for a tourist. Get Victoria on the phone, Declan said, his voice hollow. Her dad has cash. We can bridge this. We just need a few million to migrate servers and find a new bank. He dialed Victoria. She picked up on the first ring, the sound of clinking glasses in the background. Baby, where are you? The waiter is asking. If we want to open the Bollinger, Victoria chirped. Victoria, listen to me, Declan said, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. I'm stuck at the office. Minor glitch. Listen, I need to speak to your dad. Does he still want to invest in that Series B round? There was a pause. My dad? Declan, you know my dad is liquidating assets right now for his retirement. He doesn't have 5 million lying around. Declan closed his eyes. Of course. It was all smoke and mirrors, just like him. But Declan, Victoria continued, her voice turning sharp, why are you asking about money? You just dumped the dead weight, right? You're the king of tech. Yeah, Declan croaked. Yeah, I am. I'll be there in an hour. He hung up. He looked out the window at the skyline of New York. Somewhere out there, Isolde was drinking vintage champagne in a bathtub that probably cost more than his car. He had to fix this. He had to talk to her. He had to convince her it was all a mistake, a joke, a test of her love for him. Yes, that was it. He would gaslight her into thinking he did it to motivate her to reveal her true self. Gary, Declan stood up, buttoning his wet jacket. Find out where Isolde is staying. Track her phone. Check her credit cards. I don't care. Gary looked at him with pity. Declan, we can't track her. She doesn't have a credit footprint anymore. She's gone dark. It's like she's a ghost. She's not a ghost, Declan snarled, grabbing his keys. She's my wife, and she owes me an explanation. Ex-wife, Gary corrected softly. Declan threw a stapler at the wall. Just find her. The rain had not let up by the time Declan arrived at Le Bernardin. His Italian leather shoes squelched with every step, a disgusting, soggy sound that seemed to mock him. He handed his coat to the cloakroom attendant, a young woman who looked at the wet cashmere with mild disdain. Name? She asked, not making eye contact. Mercer. Declan Mercer, he said, straightening his tie. He tried to summon the aura of the CEO he was supposed to be. I have a table. A regular table. She tapped on the screen. Ah, Mr. Mercer. Yes. The main dining room is fully committed tonight. We have you seated in the annex. The annex? Declan snapped. There is no annex. I've eaten here 20 times. I sit by the window. Not tonight, sir. Changes were made to the floor plan regarding credit standing and membership tiers. Follow me. She led him past the glowing, warm, main room where the elite of New York dined under soft lighting. He saw faces he recognized, hedge fund managers, Broadway producers, tech rivals. They all seemed to look right through him. She marched him past the kitchen doors, where the smell of dish soap briefly overpowered the aroma of truffle oil, and seated him at a small, wobbly, two-top near the emergency exit. Victoria Ashcroft was already there. She was scrolling through her phone, a scowl etched deep into her perfectly contoured face. She didn't look up when he sat down. You're late, she said, and you look like a drowned rat. It's pouring, Victoria, Declan hissed, grabbing the napkin and dabbing his forehead. And don't start. I've had the worst hour of my life. I ordered the tasting menu, she said, finally looking at him, and a bottle of the 82 Latour. I needed something to wash down the embarrassment of sitting next to the bathroom. Declan choked. The 82 Latour was $5,000. Under normal circumstances, he would have waved it off as a business expense. Today, with his credit lines frozen by the Blackwood Trust, it was a death sentence. Victoria, maybe we should stick to the Pinot, he suggested, his smile tight and brittle. What? She laughed, a high, tinkling sound that lacked all warmth. Declan, you just shed the dead weight, remember? We are celebrating. Don't tell me you're turning cheap on me. That was Isolde's thing. The mention of her name made Declan flinch. Isolde, the woman who had packed him sack lunches to save money so he could buy better servers. The woman who wore the same winter coat for 4 years so he could buy a bespoke suit for his pitch meetings. He had called her cheap. He realized now, with a sickening lurch in his gut, that she wasn't cheap. She was patient. The dinner was a disaster. The waiter, a man named Pierre, who usually joked with Declan, was curt and professional, offering no complimentary appetizers, no warm banter. He poured the wine with the grim efficiency of an executioner. When the check came, it sat on the table like a lead weight, $6,400. Declan pulled out his corporate Amex. He prayed. He actually sent a silent prayer to a god he hadn't spoken to since childhood. Just let it go through. I'll fix it tomorrow. Pierre took the card. He walked away. He returned 30 seconds later. Declined, monsieur. Victoria stopped applying her lipstick. The air at the table went still. Try it again, Declan demanded, his voice rising. It's a chip error. Swipe it. We tried 3 times, monsieur. The code is do not honor. We need another form of payment. Declan patted his pockets. He pulled out his personal visa. Declined. He pulled out his debit card. Declined. Victoria stared at him, her eyes wide with horror, not for him, but for herself. She looked around to see if anyone was watching. Declan, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. You cannot be serious. You invited me to a 3-star Michelin restaurant, and you can't pay? It's a banking error. My ex-wife? She has connections. She froze my accounts. Your ex-wife? The librarian? Victoria scoffed. Declan, stop lying. You're broke. My dad warned me. He said your profit and loss sheets looked like Swiss cheese. I am not broke. I am the CEO of Mercer Dynamics, Declan shouted. A hush fell over the annex. Pierre looked ready to call security. Victoria stood up. She grabbed her Hermes bag. I'm leaving. I am not going to be seen being escorted out by the police. Victoria, wait. Can you cover it? I'll wire you double tomorrow. 10,000. Just put it on your card. Victoria looked down at him. The mask of affection dropped completely, revealing the cold calculation underneath. My card? She sneered. Declan, I don't date men who need me to pay for dinner. I date men who buy the restaurant. Lose my number. She stormed out, her heels clicking on the floorboards. Declan was left alone. He looked at Pierre. I can leave my watch, Declan stammered, unclasping the Patek Philippe. It's worth 40,000. Pierre looked at the watch, then at Declan. I will get the manager, but monsieur, I suggest you do not try to leave. Declan sat in the chair, the humiliation burning his skin like acid. He looked at the empty seat across from him. He remembered 5 years ago, at a diner in Queens. His card had been declined for a $10 burger because he had spent his last dime on a domain name. Isolde hadn't stormed out. She hadn't yelled. She had quietly slid a $20 bill under the table, squeezed his hand, and whispered, We're a team. December. Eat your fries. He had thrown away a diamond to pick up a piece of broken glass. The next 48 hours were a blur of catastrophic failures. Declan didn't go home to his penthouse because the electronic key fob didn't work. The building management informed him that the lease, which was held by a shell company, had been terminated. He slept in his office on the leather sofa, waking up to the sound of his employees packing their boxes. Gary, his CFO, walked in at 9 a.m. on Wednesday holding a resignation letter. I can't do it, Declan, Gary said, looking exhausted. The SEC is asking questions about our liquidity. The landlord is evicting us, and nobody will return my calls. It's like we have the plague. It's her, Declan muttered, staring out the window at the gray sky. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. It's Isolde. She's burning it all down. She's not burning it down, Gary corrected. She's just turning off the gas. We were running on her fuel the whole time, Declan. We just didn't know it. Gary placed his badge on the desk. Good luck, Declan. Seriously, you're going to need it. Declan was alone. His empire, built on arrogance and borrowed time, had evaporated in 3 days. But Declan Mercer was not a man who accepted defeat. He was a man who believed he could talk his way out of a firing squad. He needed to see her. He needed to talk to Isolde. If he could just get her alone, away from her bodyguards and her lawyers, he could charm her. He could remind her of the good times. He could play the victim. He could convince her that he was just stressed, that Victoria meant nothing, which was now true, and that they belonged together. He spent the morning making frantic calls to the few contacts who hadn't blocked his number. Finally, he got a hit. Trent Sterling, no relation to the lawyer, but a cousin of a friend who worked in high-end event planning, picked up the phone. Declan? Man, I heard you were persona non grata, Trent laughed. It was a cruel sound. I need to find her, Trent. I know you handle the guest lists for the Vanguard Trust events. Where is she? You mean the Blackwood heiress? The woman you dumped? You've got stones, Mercer, I'll give you that. Just tell me where she is. She's the guest of honor at the Obsidian Gala tonight, Trent said. It's at the Met. But don't bother, man. The ticket price is 50 grand, and it's invite only. The security is tighter than the G7 summit. I need to get in, Declan said, desperation clawing at his throat. Trent, I helped you with that crypto IPO last year. You owe me. There was a pause. Fine. Look, I have a vendor pass. One of the catering managers called in sick. You'll have to wear a tux, but you'll be holding a tray of champagne half the night. It's the only way you're getting past the perimeter. A waiter? Declan felt his stomach turn. I am a CEO. You were a CEO, Trent corrected. Now, you're a guy sleeping in his office. Take the pass or leave it. The Met. Back entrance. 6 p.m. Ask for Marco. Declan hung up. He looked at his reflection in the darkened monitor of his computer. He looked haggard. He looked desperate. He went to the gym in the building basement to shower. He put on his tuxedo, the only suit he had left that wasn't ruined by rain. He spent his last $100 on a haircut and a shave. He looked in the mirror. He looked like Declan Mercer again. Almost. He took a subway to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The irony was not lost on him. He had once refused to take the subway with Isolde because it was beneath him. Now, he was squeezed between a tourist eating a bagel and a man playing a bucket drum, heading to a party where his wife was the queen and he was the help. He arrived at the back entrance. The security was intense. Black SUVs lined the street. Men with earpieces scanned the crowd. He found Marco, a harried man with a clipboard. You the replacement from the agency? Marco barked. Yes, Declan said, swallowing his pride. You're late. Grab a tray. You're on the VIP floor. Section A. Keep the glasses full. Don't make eye contact with the guests. And for God's sake, don't spill anything on the Vermeers. Declan grabbed a silver tray, loaded with crystal flutes of champagne. He walked up the service elevator, his heart pounding against his ribs. He wasn't just going to serve drinks. He was going to reclaim his life. He stepped out onto the balcony, overlooking the Temple of Dendur. The sight took his breath away. He had been to galas before. He had been to tech awards and charity balls. They looked like high school proms compared to this. The room was bathed in deep indigo and gold lighting. The flowers were cascading orchids that must have been flown in from the Amazon that morning. The guests weren't just rich. They were the people who owned the people who were rich. He saw a former U.S. president chatting with a Saudi prince. He saw the founder of the world's largest search engine laughing with a woman who owned a European car manufacturer. And then he saw her. Isolde stood in the center of the room, but she wasn't the Isolde he knew. Gone was the messy bun. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of dark silk, styled in soft waves that framed a face which seemed to glow. Gone was the gray cardigan. She was wearing a dress that looked like it was woven from starlight, a deep midnight blue velvet that hugged her frame, with diamonds scattered across the fabric that caught the light with every breath she took. Around her neck was a necklace that Declan recognized from a magazine cover, the Star of the East, a sapphire and diamond piece worth more than the GDP of a small island nation. She wasn't shrinking, she wasn't hiding, she was holding court. A circle of men and women surrounded her, listening intently. Declan recognized one of them, Alexander Vane, a shark of an investor who had rejected Declan's funding application 3 years ago without even looking at him. Now, Vane was looking at Isolde with pure deference, nodding at whatever she was saying. Declan gripped the silver tray so hard his knuckles turned white. Anger flared in his chest. She lied to me, he thought. She hid all of this. She tested me like a lab rat. He began to move through the crowd. He was invisible. To these people, a waiter was furniture. He wove through the tuxedos and the ball gowns, his eyes locked on his wife. He got close enough to hear her voice. It was different. It was the same pitch, the same timbre, but the cadence was authoritative. Sustainable energy isn't just a moral imperative, Alexander, Isolde was saying, swirling a glass of sparkling water. It's a stability index. The Blackwood Trust is moving 40% of its liquid assets into fusion research by Q3. If you want Vane Capital to survive the next decade, I suggest you pivot. Oil is a dead language. Brilliant, Alexander Vane murmured. Absolutely brilliant, Isolde. I'll have my analysts look into the fusion sector tomorrow. Do that, she said coolly. Declan stepped forward. He couldn't help himself. He couldn't just stand there holding a tray. Champagne, madame? He said, his voice straining to be steady. The circle of billionaires turned to look at the waiter who had interrupted. Isolde froze. She didn't turn around immediately. She took a slow breath, recognizing the voice. She turned. Her eyes met his. For a moment, Declan expected to see fear, or love, or regret. He saw nothing. It was like looking into a deep, dark well. Declan, she said. She didn't sound surprised. She sounded disappointed. I see the severance package ran out quickly. The people around her chuckled nervously. They sensed the tension, though they didn't know who this waiter was. Can we talk? Declan whispered, ignoring the stares. Please, alone. Isolde looked at him, scanning his tuxedo, the tray in his hand, the desperation in his eyes. I'm in the middle of a conversation, Declan. You remember what that's like, don't you? You used to tell me never to interrupt you when you were working. Izzy, please. I know who you are now. I know everything. You know nothing, she said softly. Alexander Vane stepped forward, looking annoyed. Is this staff member bothering you, Miss Blackwood? Should I call security? No, Isolde raised a hand. It's fine, Alexander. This is an old acquaintance. Give us a moment. The circle dispersed, leaving a respectful distance. Isolde and Declan stood alone in the middle of the crowded room, the music swelling around them. You look beautiful, Declan said. It was the truth. I looked beautiful last week too, Isolde said. You just didn't look at me. Why did you lie? Why did you pretend to be poor? We lived in that roach-infested apartment in Queens. We ate ramen. Why? Because, Isolde said, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the noise. I wanted to be loved for me, not for the Blackwood money, not for the connections. I wanted a partner who would build something with me from the ground up. I wanted to see if you had character, Declan. I built a company, Declan protested. I worked hard. You worked hard, she conceded. But you became cruel. You became small. You fell in love with the reflection of yourself in the mirror, and you treated me like the Windex you used to clean it. I can change, Declan pleaded. He put the tray down on a nearby table, crashing it slightly. I can be the man you want. Take me back, Izzy. We can run the trust together. Imagine what we could do. Mercer Dynamics and Blackwood. We'd be unstoppable. Isolde laughed. It was a sad sound. You still don't get it. There is no we. You signed the papers, Declan. And frankly, you're a liability. A liability? I'm a visionary. You're a fraud, she said calmly. And I'm not just talking about your marriage. I'm talking about your code. Declan went cold. What? Mercer Dynamics. Your proprietary algorithm for data compression? The one you claim you wrote in your garage? Isolde took a sip of her water. You didn't write it. You lifted the core kernel from an open-source project funded by guess who? No, Declan breathed. The Vanguard Institute, Isolde finished. My family's research wing. We let you use it because I was your wife. I shielded you from the copyright lawsuit. But now, the legal team is filing the injunction tomorrow morning. You don't just owe the bank money, Declan. You're about to be sued for intellectual property theft on a global scale. Declan staggered back. This wasn't just a divorce. This was an annihilation. You're destroying me, he whispered. Why? Because I wanted a divorce? Because I fell out of love? Isolde stepped closer. She smelled of jasmine and cold rain. No, Declan. I'm not destroying you because you wanted a divorce. I would have let you go with a settlement and a smile. I'm destroying you because you mocked me. You humiliated me. You treated kindness as weakness. She leaned in, her lips inches from his ear. You wanted a trophy wife, Declan? You wanted someone powerful? Well, here she is. And you know what powerful people do? They remove obstacles. She pulled back and signaled to a large man standing in the shadows. The same man who had held the umbrella, Arthur. Arthur, Isolde said, her voice returning to its public volume. Please escort this waiter out. He's upsetting the guests. No, wait. Declan grabbed her arm. The room gasped. Touching a Blackwood was like touching the third rail. Arthur was on him in a second. A hand like a vice gripped Declan's wrist, twisting it painfully behind his back. Let go of me, Declan shouted. I'm her husband. I'm Declan Mercer. Ex-husband, Isolde corrected, turning her back on him. And nobody knows who Declan Mercer is anymore. As Arthur dragged him toward the exit, Declan looked back. He saw Victoria Ashcroft entering the room on the arm of a 70-year-old oil tycoon. She saw Declan being hauled out like trash. She didn't look shocked. She looked at Isolde, then looked down, terrified. Declan was thrown out of the back door of the Met, landing on the wet pavement of Central Park. The heavy metal door slammed shut, sealing the light and the music inside. He was alone in the dark. But the story wasn't over. Declan Mercer had one card left to play, a card he had found in the old apartment, hidden in a box of Isolde's things he had meant to throw away. A positive pregnancy test, dated 2 weeks ago. The discovery of the plastic stick in the damp pocket of his ruined tuxedo jacket felt like divine intervention to Declan Mercer. He stood in the shadows of Central Park, the lights of the Metropolitan Museum fading behind him, and stared at the 2 pink lines. She's pregnant, he thought, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in his throat. She's carrying a Mercer. The realization rewired his entire brain. The fear and humiliation of the last few days evaporated, replaced by the calculating coldness that had built his company. A child wasn't just a baby. In the world of trillion-dollar trusts and dynastic wealth, a child was leverage. A child was a seat at the table. Isolde could divorce him, she could bankrupt him, she could sue him for intellectual property theft, but she could not erase biology. If she was the heiress to the Blackwood fortune, his child was the heir apparent. And that made Declan the father of the future king. You didn't cut all the strings, Izzy, he whispered to the wet trees. You left one attached. The blockade. Declan spent the night in a 24-hour internet cafe in Times Square, his tuxedo drying stiff and smelling of the park. He didn't sleep. He researched paternity rights in high-asset divorces. He researched Blackwood succession laws. He built a dossier. By 8 a.m., he was ready to strike. He knew he couldn't just walk up to her. He needed a conduit. He tried to call the major news outlets, the Times, the Post, CNBC. He had a scoop. Secret Blackwood heir, fathered by tech CEO. He dialed the tip line for the New York Chronicle. I have a story about Isolde Blackwood, he told the operator. I have proof of a pregnancy she's hiding. The line went dead immediately. He tried a gossip blog. This is Declan Mercer. I have exclu Mr. Mercer, a bored voice interrupted. We have been issued a cease and desist order regarding your name and any mention of the Blackwood family, effective 6 a.m. this morning. If you contact us again, we are legally obligated to report you for harassment. Good day. Declan stared at the phone. She was scrubbing him from existence. She controlled the narrative before he even opened his mouth. He realized then that the media was a dead end. He had to go to the source. He had to serve her. The hangar. He spent his last remaining cash on a bribe to a disgruntled porter at the hotel where he knew Arthur, the bodyguard, was staying. The porter revealed that the Blackwood party was scheduled to depart from Teterboro Airport at noon. They were flying back to Zurich. Declan stole a jacket from a construction site to cover his tuxedo and took 3 buses to New Jersey. He arrived at the private airfield just as the convoy of black SUVs pulled onto the tarmac. There it was, the Blackwood jet. It was a converted Boeing 787 Dreamliner, painted matte black with a subtle silver crest on the tail. It was a palace in the sky. Declan ran toward the chain-link fence. He saw Isolde walking up the air stairs. She wore a cream-colored trench coat and sunglasses. She looked untouchable. Isolde, he screamed, shaking the fence. Isolde! I know! The wind carried his voice. She paused on the stairs. She didn't look around wildly. She simply turned her head with deliberate precision. She saw him clinging to the fence like a prisoner. She said something to Arthur. Arthur nodded and walked down the stairs. He didn't come to the fence. He signaled to the airport security. The gate opened, and a golf cart drove Declan out onto the tarmac. They didn't arrest him. They brought him to the bottom of the stairs. Isolde looked down at him from the top of the gangway. She looked like a goddess judging a mortal. "You are persistent, Declan," she said. The engines were whining softly, a high-pitched reminder of the power she wielded. "I'll give you that." "I found the test, Izzy," Declan shouted over the turbine whine. He pulled the plastic stick from his pocket and held it up like a holy relic. "I found it in the apartment. 2 weeks ago. You're pregnant." Isolde's expression didn't change. She didn't gasp. She didn't flinch. "And?" she asked. "And?" Declan laughed incredulously. "And that's my child. That is the heir to your empire. You can't just leave. I have rights. I am the father. If you leave the country with my child, I will have every court in The Hague after you for kidnapping." He felt the power returning. He took a step up the stairs. Arthur blocked him with a massive hand to the chest. "You can't cut me out of this, Isolde," Declan sneered. "I want my shares. I want my company back. And I want a monthly stipend of 50,000. Or I go public with the baby. I'll make sure the world knows the Virgin Queen of Banking is carrying the child of a fraud." Isolde slowly took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were tired, but hard as diamonds. "Come here, Declan," she said softly. Arthur stepped aside. Declan walked up the stairs until he was 3 steps below her. He was close enough to smell her perfume. He smirked. He had won. "Do you remember the papers you signed on Tuesday?" she asked calmly. "The ones you mocked? The ones you didn't read because you were too busy texting Victoria?" "I signed a standard separation agreement," Declan scoffed. "Standard agreements don't cover unborn children." I checked. "You didn't sign a standard agreement, Declan," Isolde said, her voice dropping an octave. "You signed a total severance of entity." She signaled to a lawyer standing in the doorway of the plane. The lawyer handed her a leather folder. She opened it to a page flagged with red tape. Clause 74, Section C. She read aloud. "The signatory, Declan Mercer, hereby irrevocably waives any and all rights, claims, or interests in any future assets, biological issues, or genetic materials resulting from the union, known or unknown, at the time of signing." The signatory acknowledges that for the expedience of the dissolution, he accepts a complete termination of paternity rights for any unborn progeny in exchange for the immediate waiver of spousal debt. Declan stared at her. "That's not legal. You can't sign away a baby. In the United States? Maybe not." Isolde closed the folder with a snap. "But we were married in Zurich, Declan. Remember? The romantic elopement you insisted on to avoid inviting your parents? Under Swiss banking and succession laws, which governed our marriage contract, that clause is ironclad. You traded your child for a quick divorce so you could make a dinner reservation. The world seemed to tilt on its axis." Declan gripped the handrail. "No," he whispered. "I didn't know. I didn't read it." "Ignorance is not a defense," Isolde said coldly. "It is a choice. You chose to be arrogant. You chose to be cruel. And in your rush to throw me away, you threw away your legacy." "But it's a baby," Declan's voice cracked, tears finally spilling over. "It's a person. You can't keep a father from his child because of a contract? Izzy, please, I'm begging you. I have nothing left. Don't take this." Isolde looked at him. For a fleeting second, the mask slipped. He saw the pain she had been hiding, the pain of a woman who had loved a man who turned into a monster. "You are right, Declan," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It is a baby, my baby." She placed a hand on her stomach. "And I will raise this child to know exactly who their father was. I will tell them he was a man who taught me the most important lesson of my life, that worth is not found in bank accounts, and character is not found in titles." She stepped back into the cabin. "You're not the father, Declan," she said, as the door began to close. "You're just the donor, and your transaction is complete. Easy, no, Isolde. The heavy, airtight door hissed shut, sealing her away from him forever. The aftermath. Arthur and the security team escorted Declan back to the tarmac. They left him standing there as the massive engines of the Dreamliner roared to life. The heat from the exhaust blasted him, blowing his stolen jacket open, whipping his hair into his eyes. He watched the plane taxi down the runway. He watched it pick up speed, faster and faster, a black arrow shooting toward the freedom he would never know. It lifted off. It climbed into the gray clouds, banking east toward Europe, toward trillions of dollars, toward his child. Declan fell to his knees on the concrete. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the pregnancy test. He looked at it one last time. Then he crushed it in his fist, the plastic shattering, cutting his palm. He didn't feel the pain. He didn't feel anything. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out numbly. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Job alert. Assistant manager at Burger King. Location: Queens. Salary: minimum wage. Declan Mercer, the man who had almost touched the sun, looked at the screen. He looked at the sky, where the jet had vanished. He stood up, wiped the blood from his hand onto his dirty tuxedo pants, and began the long walk back to the bus stop. Declan Mercer spent 5 years looking for gold, never realizing he was sleeping next to a diamond mine. He chased the illusion of power and lost the reality of love. In the end, his arrogance didn't just cost him his company or his reputation. It cost him his bloodline. He signed his life away with a sneer, thinking he was the smartest man in the room, only to realize too late that the quietest person at the table is often the one holding all the cards. He learned the hard way that when you treat people like disposable stepping stones, you eventually run out of ground to stand on. Declan is still out there, somewhere in Queens, likely looking up at the sky every time a jet flies over, wondering if his own flesh and blood is looking down. But regret, unlike a contract, has no expiration date. What a brutal ending for Declan. Do you think he deserved to lose his rights to the child? Or did Isolde go too far with that final clause? That was a twist that even I didn't see coming. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of karma, betrayal, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. And here is my question for you today. If you were Isolde, would you have told Declan about the child, or would you have kept it a secret forever? Let me know your answer in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss the next drama. I'll see you in the next story.